appreciate the hell out of you guys. I would hug the tits off you if you were here right now. If you could subscribe, if you're new, that would mean the world. And one last little favor before you go. Go into the fridge, grab a 2-liter of Mountain Dew, run out to the back porch, throw it in your neighbor's pool. Immediately sprint to your car, peel out, go to your local high school, do 35 pull-ups off the field goal post in the football field, then run inside of the school, find the chemistry lab, go inside, smash the closest beaker with your face so the glass is all over the ground, take off your shirts and pants, lie down in that shit, do 10 snow angels, and then hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. If you could do me a favor before you go, just take some ramen, some Ritz crackers, and some saltines and crush that shit up and roll it up into a chip bag, add a little hot water, let it materialize into a dough-like substance, take it out, knead it a little bit like it's actual pizza dough, stretch it, and then slap the underside of your ball bag with it, then turn it into a pizza, cook it in the microwave on high for 5 minutes, and once you take it out, you finish that motherfucking pizza, pull down your pants, and you hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me, right? If you could do me one last favor before you go, just head into your pantry and grab the Kool-Aid, rub a little bit on each one of your cheeks, and let Ice Mike lick it off, and let that experience kind of reform the moral fiber of your core so that for the next 20 years, you don't really do anything bad, and then eventually you relapse morally and you commit a couple of class 3 felonies and finally get incarcerated. And when you're finally in jail and you're sitting there in your cell brushing your teeth with that shitty little toothbrush that's not even big enough to turn into a shank, you look at yourself in the mirror, you pull down your pants and you hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. You can also catch me catching you hip thrusting that motherfucking like button if you know what's good for you. Video, make sure before you go, you stand up out of your chair, slam down a gallon of milk, slip on it, smash all of your teeth in, and as you get up and you pick them up one by one off the floor, put them in a little Ziploc baggie, seal that shit up, put it right down in your chest pocket, and you hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me before you leave. You guys, for lubing up both of your quadriceps, downing a 24-ounce glass of whole milk, standing up, ripping off your pants, and hip thrusting that motherfucking like button. Last favor, just grab all of the 3 Musketeers out of your little candy sack, open them all, melt them down in a pot, and pour that shit all over yourself where you're completely buck-ass naked in the shower. Then jump down onto the floor of the shower, sneeze 3 times, and get right the fuck back up.
And hip thrust that motherfucking like.
Hallelujah. We'll see you in the next video streams. And please pull down your shorts and sit your bare asshole on a chocolate cake and rip a humongous fart and then stand up and hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. Do me a favor and sit down and just watch a 3-day marathon of Jerry Springer without blinking your eyes once. And then at the very end of it, lean back and put a little eyedropper of Listerine into both your eyes until they start to bleed, and then pull down your pants and hip thrust that motherfucking like button. If you could just head down to your local dairy farm and grab the first cow you see and headbutt them right in the face, and then suck a half a gallon of milk right out of the teat, stand up, tip that bitch over, drop your pants and hip thrust that motherfucking like button for them. Grab your mother's razor and shave the small of your back, and take those hair shavings and twirl them up into a little ball, and then place that ball of lower back hair on your tongue and swallow it down like a vitamin, and stand up and hip thrust that motherfucking like button. Stand up boldly out of your chair and hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. If you could just rub mayonnaise on the inside of your thighs and hop on a treadmill and run 15 miles at 8.5 miles per hour and then hop off and immediately hip thrust that motherfucking like button. One last favor before you go, just grab an empty snack bag of cheddar cheese veggie straws and hyperventilate into it. As soon as you're done doing that, elbow the shit out of Nigel, get out of your chair, whip your pants down, and you hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. 2 more solid before you go. Just print out a low-resolution picture of Roseanne Barr and place it in your cat's litter box for 8 weeks. And then once it's covered in excrement, take it out, crumple it up, place it in your mouth, and chew on it like a piece of bubblegum for 45 minutes. You unzip your pants, and you hip thrust that motherfucking like button. Last favor, and just brew a fresh 10-cup pot of coffee. Let it cool down to room temperature for a couple hours, and then mix in some soy sauce and some wet cat food. Let it incorporate. Make sure it's mixed really good, and then dunk your hand in and let your hand marinate for about 2 to 2.5 hours. At which point, just take your hand out, go like this, and then hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. Just grab a model Boeing 737, cover it in sriracha, and insert it into your rear end, and slowly, delicately hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. Maybe just buy your own damn iPhone 11 Pro, bring it home, slowly take it out of the box while you hyperventilate, put on a Pennywise mask, and just record yourself holding the iPhone and screaming into the camera for 25 minutes and upload that to the internet and get a couple million views, and then unzip your shorts, pull them down, and hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. Before you go, just smash your face into your nightstand 3 to 4 times as hard as you can so you really mess up your nose, and then just get yourself a government-funded nose job to fix it. And then once you're done and recovered after 8 weeks and the bruising's gone, just pull down your pants and hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. Before you go, just drop your shorts or your pants, hit me with a real aggressive woo, and then you hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. Before you go, just hop in your dad's pickup truck and travel around town gathering all the sheep you can find, bring them to your backyard and just have a blast slaughtering them all. Then fill up your pockets with raw sheep meat and hop in a cold shower for about 45 minutes and have yourself a nice good cry because Derek Nance has a girlfriend and you still don't. And then you just drop your shorts and hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. Just offer your significant other to go to the grocery store. Say, you know what, I'd love to stock the kitchen, buy whatever you'd like, and have them write you up a list of what they want, and then go to the grocery store and purchase absolutely nothing on that list. Come home, and when they question you, just pull some frozen venison out of the freezer and smash them over the head until they're unconscious on the kitchen floor. And then just take out your phone, check your bank balance, make sure everything's in order, pull down your pants, and you hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. Mine, just run downstairs, pour yourself a tall 20-ounce glass of ice cold milk, then head to the bathroom, do a handstand on the toilet bowl and give yourself a swirly, then go back to the kitchen, wrap your hand in 3 layers of tinfoil, and just dragon punch that glass of milk as hard as you can so it spills all over the kitchen floor and the glass shatters all over the place. And you just want to get down, lie on your back in the glass and milk, and do 10 to 12 snow angels, unzip your fly, and you hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. One little favor before you go, just grab yourself a jet, preferably if you could buy it off of Tyler Perry for a very reasonable price. Make sure you watch the movie Medea on the private jet while you're flying over to Lisa Guerrera's house. Once you land, you want to head to Lisa's house, grasp her hand nice and firmly, and just say a nice prayer for Lisa. And the second you finish up and you say amen, you stand up out of your chair and you hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. Here you go. Just cop 2 train tickets. Grab your grandmother, head out to the train. As soon as the train gets to full speed, find the closest emergency door. You want to hang out of that bitch as far as you can go. Take a sick pic of you making out with your grandmother hanging outside that train, and then you hip thrust that motherfucking like button. Before you go, if you don't mind, just grab 80 ounces of Mountain Dew and chug that shit down in less than a minute. You're not allowed to burp either, but you can right after you're done regurgitate that into a big pot and then force your sister to chug that down. And she gets 90 seconds because she's probably a little less experienced than you are. And as soon as she finishes that, hit her in the gut so she regurgitates that back up into the bathtub. Then I want you to get in that bathtub, swim around for about 15-20 minutes, give yourself a nice bath and regurgitated Mountain Dew, and then sip all of that shit down through a PVC size straw. And you're gonna have about 35 seconds for that. And as soon as that gets all the way down, you hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. Just go ahead and tell your wife or girlfriend or your husband or your boyfriend that you're cheating on them. It's a prank, obviously, so no big deal. But as things start to get a little bit heated and your neighbor that you share a wall with calls the cops on suspicion of there being some domestic abuse going on in your apartment, well, just wait till the cops get there. And then once they realize that there was, in fact, domestic abuse and you guys were beating the piss out of each other, just fill out the report and then wait till you get handcuffed and stuffed in the back of the cruiser. And then ask the cop kindly if you could just slip your phone out of your pocket and hold it right up to the tip of your Johnson, and then headbutt the cop and then hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. Here you go. If you could go ahead and find your own Bigfoot out in the wilderness somewhere, you kill that bitch, you cut him up, you bring him back to the crib, freeze him for a couple of days. Once he's all the way frozen solid, you just want to get rid of all the body parts except the hips. And you take those Bigfoot hips and a couple of bungee cords and you tie those Bigfoot hips around your own hips. And then you get up and you double hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. Here you go. Leave a comment down below. Then head out to your local mall with a friend. Have them record you just going up to a random person and start making out with them. Put it up on Instagram, get 3 million views. And then once you get served with a lawsuit for sexual assault, just take those papers, light that shit on fire because it don't matter because you're Instagram famous, baby. And then hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. In the last order of business, if you could, just cover yourself in petroleum jelly. All right, find a walk-in freezer, spend 24 hours in it. The second that 24 hours is up, come out of the freezer, freezing your ass off, right? Take your cell phone, box it up, ship it to your aunt that has to live at least a minimum 30 minutes away. The second she gets that package, it should have written instructions in it, so when she opens it up, she knows how to turn on your phone, log into your YouTube account, pull up this video, and hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. Favor before you go, just throw on some yoga pants and head over to the local gym. Don't even worry about working out. Screw that noise, right? Just head into the bathroom, take an over-the-shoulder mirror selfie, throw that baby up on throw that baby up on Instagram and hit it with 30 relevant hashtags and hit post. And then when you wake up the next morning and you're already an influencer, you hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. Go ahead and grab your favorite Christmas tree ornament directly off the tree, soak it in kerosene for 15 minutes, and then put it on a baking sheet and cook it in the oven for about 30 minutes on 375 degrees. And as soon as that timer goes off and that baby's done, pull it out of the oven, put it on top, and just completely disregard it, and grab a baseball bat and smash out every single one of your living room windows, and then take a piece of glass, ram it into your thigh, and hip thrust that motherfucking like button. Just spend the next like 6 to 7 years, I think it'll probably take about that long, eating no less than 10,000 calories a day until you've put on hundreds and hundreds of pounds of fat. So you're just one big bounty of flesh. And then inevitably when you're just lying in bed because you can't get out of it and your sores all over your body and your heart's about to collapse, just take a deep breath. And as you exhale, just think to yourself, man, that was so worth it. And at that point, just hip thrust the motherfucking like button. Do me one last favor before you go. Grab a blender and fill it with 2 packs of cigarettes and a pint of milk. Hit blend, pulse a few times, get that mixture nice and fine, and pour it into an ice cube tray and put that in the freezer and let it freeze overnight. And then the next day, when those milky cigarette ice cubes are nice and frozen, you want to slowly pop them out one by one and start whipping them at your neighbor's dog in their backyard. And the second your neighbor finds out and calls the cops on you, once the cops show up, they start questioning you. Why are you throwing ice cubes at the dog, and what the hell are these ice cubes made of? You look them right in the eye, you drop your pants, and you hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. Before you go, though, if you could just walk around your neighborhood and collect as many pumpkins as you can find, bring them all back to the house, cut them open, and just eat all of the pumpkin guts you can muster. Just stuff it all down your throat until you get the urge to let it all come back up. But then find like a local wedding at a church nearby. Like, you know, there's weird couples that get married on Halloween night, and get to the service, walk halfway down the aisle while they're in the middle of the vows, and just projectile vomit those pumpkin guts all over the church floor, and then hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. Before leaving, buckle down for a few more months until Christmas time. Once the whole family's gathered around the Christmas tree, I want you to roll up there and pretend like you're handing your mother a gift and say, I have stage 4 lymphoma. And then after everyone's crying and they all think you're gonna die, just rip off your Christmas... Fuck! Yeah, I hate when I fumble over my words. Just rip off your Christmas sweater and say, gotcha, bitch. And then hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. Just grab a plane ticket over to the Boston area here, roll up to my place, shake my hand, and then take my shorts off and wring those out because they're soaked with ass sweat, and wring that ass sweat into like a little mason jar, and then wear that jar around your neck like a necklace for 2 weeks, fly back home, and when you get home, I want you to pour that jar out into a tall glass and drink that puppy dog down, and then hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. Before you head out, throw on a snorkel, put on a corset, throw a few anal beads in, and lie down in a bathtub full of Listerine for about 12 to 13 hours. Get out of that bathtub, let yourself air dry in the sun, and then hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. Before we wrap this up, just put on like 3 or 4 pairs of your father's boxer briefs, then spend about 2.5 weeks sleeping outside underneath your porch, living off of only rice cakes and jelly beans, and after that time, head back inside eventually and treat yourself to a Slim Jim, and then hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. And head down to your local supermarket, pick up 3 onions, 2 limes, and probably like a head of leeks, I think, and a can of root beer, and head back home, pop that shit in the blender, hit it pulse like 5 or 6 times, and then take that blender full of shit, whip it as hard as you can at the closest window, and when that window shatters, you go over and you pick up a shard of broken glass from the floor, and you just cut open one of your couch cushions, pull out a little bit of the stuffing, and then crawl inside that couch cushion and hide for about 3 to 4 weeks, and just when your family's almost done mourning your disappearance, you want to bust out of that couch cushion, go, surprise, motherfuckers, I'm back, and then hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. Second, go to your cousin's high school graduation. You want to form tackle the principal while he's on stage handing out diplomas to these little snot-nosed high schoolers, and after you form tackle him on the ground, you heel stomp him in the solar plexus, and then get up and you teabag him, Halo Online multiplayer style, and then you hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. And just head out to your garage, grab the weed whacker that your dad left in there. There should be a little bit of gas left in it. Head over to your neighbor's house across the street and just blow that weed whacker all up and down the side of his house and just fuck up his shingles. And when he comes out the house screaming, hey, you little piece of shit, what are you doing? You throw a rock at his car window. And when he charges you because he's pissed off, when he runs directly at you and is coming with a fucking haymaker, you do a jumping backflip dragon kick to his chin. And as he's lying unconscious on the ground, you take off his shirt, you pour a little bit of milk in his belly button, you go, you snoot that milk out of his belly button, and then you hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. Head on down to your local recycling center and pick up a brand new bin and bring that shit back home and fill up that bin with old unused hard drives and Ethernet cables. And around 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, you want to unexplainably go into your parents' room and stand at the foot of their bed and hold that bin over their head and proclaim with authority, Leon Lush, aka Daddy Deep Dick, aka the Dawn of the Tomato Mafia, I bestow upon you this recycling bin of unused hard drives and Ethernet cables in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And then you drop that shit right on their face and you hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. If you could just create a fake Facebook account, find out who your mayor's daughter is, and then build a rapport with her online. You're gonna catfish her, right? Pretending you're someone you're not, until you build enough of a relationship with her that she's willing to meet you in public. And as the nerves are building and you finally get close to that date where you're gonna meet, you show up, and when she realizes you're not who you say you were, you go, gotcha, bitch! And then you headbutt her in the solar plexus and you hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. If you could just go to your local fraternity house, find a beer bong and jam that shit right into your urethra and pour an entire bottle of Listerine into there and then go hang upside down from a birch tree for about 24 hours while that Listerine marinates inside of your urinary tract. And when the pain is so great, so unbearable that you're forced to release your grip on that birch tree and plummet down into the ground, at that very moment you pull out your phone, you pull up my video, and you hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. Hop over to twitch.tv/Leon Lush and hit me with that follow so you can watch me play some video games. And after you're done doing that, follow me on every single social media account that I own, because it's what the Lord would do. WWJD, he'd follow Leon Lush fucking everywhere. And when you're done doing that, if you could just throw on a starter jacket, suck on a candy cane for about 20 minutes until it corrodes into like a sharp point, and stab yourself in the carotid artery, and as you're bleeding out and gasping for air, hip thrust that motherfucking like button. Before leaving, and just fill up a Ziploc bag full of empty printer ink cartridges and microwave that on high for 2.5 minutes, and then take a baseball bat and smash your parents' mailbox into the ground and then hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. Fill up your bathtub with lukewarm water, duct tape a toaster oven to your chest, and then jump right into that bathtub with the toaster plugged in and then electrocute that motherfucking like button. Small favor, drive to the closest Catholic church near your house, hop into that confessional booth, and when the priest gets in there, just ask him a simple question. Be like, Father, how many pennies would it take to fill up a hammock? And when he looks at you through that screen, perplexed, and says, my son, what the fuck are you talking about? Then you want to reach through the screen, punch him in the face, rip his robe off, head all the way home, put some shaving cream on your tits, take that robe off, and then hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. Start a religious ministry of your own and scam people out of their hard-earned money for 30 plus years and somehow avoid paying taxes on it, make millions and millions of dollars off of the loss of others. And when you finally retire filthy rich and you're somehow still able to sleep at night, I want you to go down to your basement where your gaming setup is, sit down in the computer chair, preferably a DX Racer like the one you see right here, and slowly slip off your trousers, fire up Fortnite if it's still relevant at this point. Get the stream going, and then hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me before you go, and just hop onto your private jet with some beautiful girls, start up a party, and just as that party's hitting the apex and you're flying over the Atlantic Ocean, I want you to go up to the pilot's cabin, look the pilot in the face, give him a little wink, then headbutt him as hard as you can right in the nose so he gets knocked unconscious. And then as that plane, that private jet, starts plummeting towards the ocean, I just want you to sit in the co-captain's chair with a big grin on your face. In the second before that plane hits the water and everybody dies, pull out your phone and hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. Do me a favor and head upstairs, kiss your mother goodnight, roll back downstairs into the kitchen, make yourself a peanut butter and fluff sandwich, put some bananas in it if you want. If you don't like bananas, that's fine, it'll work without them. Then take that sandwich, put it under your armpit, squeeze it down real slow until the fluff starts to come out just between your chest and your bicep. And once that fluff gets on that, just kind of like spread a little bit of that fluff onto the nipple portion of your titty, and then just hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. Favor and grab your dad's keys, or your mom's keys if you know dad's not in the picture, and head out to your local CVS or Walgreens. Go right to the back where the pharmacy is and just ask them for a little bit of codeine or some scissor, if you would, and they'll laugh you out of there. But before you go, grab a pack of Ricola cough drops, and then just drive home with those. And once you get home, put them in a saucepan and melt them down, and then stick your hand into it, and then put a handprint of Ricola cough drop syrup on the bathroom wall, and then punch yourself in the dick and hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me.
Y'all could do Gay Baby Angel Dad a favor and head out to your local supermarket, pick up 2 Brussels sprouts and an eggplant. After you return home, boil those Brussels sprouts on medium heat for no longer than 15 minutes and cut that eggplant in half. Then cover yourself in a bed sheet like you're trying to be a ghost on Halloween. At this point, just undo your belt, slowly slide your pants down, and hip thrust that motherfucking like button and leave a comment.
If you could just grab a Holy Bible. If you're in a hotel, you know where it is.
Yeah.
If you're at home and you have one, that's perfect. But just grab it. Read a passage from 2nd Deuteronomy, preferably chapter 3, verse 4. One of my favorites. And then take that Holy Bible and smack the piss out of your dog with it and get rid of those motherfucking demons. And after you do, and your dog's probably lying unconscious on the floor, this is going terribly bad because I know people love pets.
The ads have not.
We are already.
I think we brought the demons back into the room.
We just went off the ledge.
Yes, we did.
Anyways, you pick up your unconscious dog, you put him on your shoulder, and you hurl him out the front door into the garden. And then you pull down your pants and you hit thrust that motherfucking like button for me. Grab yourself a 24-inch balloon. Only blow it up to about the 14-inch mark. Then just start singing the song We Will Rock You by Queen, but use the screech of the escaping air to replace just a few of the lyrics as you go. Buddy, you're a boy, make a big noise, playing in the street, gonna be a big... You got mud on your big disc, kicking your cat all over the place, singing we rock... Singing we will... Then you just let all the air out. You stand up out of your chair and you hip thrust that motherfucking like button for me. Please take it away.
Wait, what?
Take it away.
Tell them what to do. Tell them what to do.
Hip thrust the motherfucking like button.
Let me channel my inner Zango here.
Hip thrust that motherfucking like button! Yeah, babe!
You know what I want. No, fuck that. We've had enough of that. I want you to hip thrust that motherfucking like button. Then you can go sicko mode. Go ahead. Yeah, just hip thrust. There you go. Nice work.
Nice.